Hello world, it's Lee Kelson coming to you live on the deck of Suncare, and I'm here with the CEO, Russell Mason. How are you, Russell?
I'm great, Lee. Great to see you.
Thanks for chatting with us today. And just before we get in and talk about a little bit of your interesting backstory, Ranger Russell, I want to just talk about what's in the background over here. Can you tell us what's happening over here?
So what's in the background here, what you can see, and we'll step out the way, is the groundwork of a new smart city coming out of the ground. Right. So it was 45 hectares. That was originally a golf course right in the middle of Maroochydore, in the middle of the Sunshine Coast, which is now being purchased by the council and is having the infrastructure laid down to turn it into the first Greenfield smart city in Australia. Probably in the southern hemisphere, but certainly in Australia in the last 30 years. So we haven't seen a new city centre come out of the ground that is Greenfield for a very long time.
Yeah, that's amazing. And when you say smart city and Greenfield, what are we talking about?
So when we talk Greenfield, it means it doesn't have existing infrastructure in place. There's no buildings, there's no underground conduits, there's no water, there's nothing. It's completely fresh. So everything has been planned from the beginning to actually be a smart city, which means when you're putting in all the conduits, all the information, you're putting in all the cables, all the fibre optics, all of the bits and pieces we now need in today's world to actually utilise all the digital tools that are available to us.
Right. So what sort of things are we going to see in a smart city like this?
So there's all sorts of infrastructure things you can see, and there's going to be a whole heap of software spin-offs, but one of the infrastructure areas is, instead of having rubbish trucks come along and pick up rubbish on a weekly basis, there's pneumatic tubes being put in the whole city. So it all goes into a recycling centre and gets taken away. So you're in an apartment, as tall as it is, your rubbish goes down a chute, disappears. Great thing is you can sleep in the morning without the rubbish truck waking you up. The second great thing is all of the rubbish goes into one place and can actually be reused. So you can actually sort it as it's going through that process as well. That's one thing. Another thing is all the lighting will be smart. So all the lighting as you walk around the city will turn off when it's unnecessary, turn on when it is. People will be tracked, so we know what's being used, what's doing it, just following mobile phones, things like that. So we know what amenities people are using, what they're not using, what's working, what's not working. If you've got an event on, you can see where people are congregating, which allows, if you like, to look and make sure you've got the right people in place to ensure that you can help them get to where they need to go or sort out what's going on there. That's just the infrastructure side. The buildings will be smart because they'll have all of the high-tech information in it, which means they can all be set up to utilise sun, utilise solar energy, utilise the actual smarts of the new fibre optic cables. It'll be a 10 gigabyte system that's coming in here. So, you talk about gig cities, this is minimum 10 gig city. Every building in this will have the ability to turn up their internet speed so they can access the world. What's also interesting is now that we've got the submarine fibre optic cable linking us with Hong Kong, into the US, directly into the US, and also into, I'm just trying to remember the fourth location, Hong Kong, Guam, it's going through Guam, Hawaii into the US as well. Right. What this means is that, because this is a cable that's owned by the city, is that by the Sunshine Coast City, I say, it means that people will be able to have direct access to these locations, faster access and as much speed as they need. Right. If not more.
So when we talk submarine cable, I mean, is it exactly what it sounds like?
What it is, around the world, most telecommunications that we use, so if you're sending this video around the world and people are watching this in Sweden, it's actually been transmitted by a fibre optic cable under the oceans. It's not going via the satellites. 99% of all communications in the world go under a fibre optic, which is only about this big, cable that goes underneath the world and interconnects. So what it is, it's the Sunshine Coast will be one of only 4 locations in Australia, well, actually 3, which is Perth, Sydney and the Sunshine Coast, who actually have a linkage to the rest of the world. Wow. Because we're also closer to places like Hong Kong than, say, Sydney, it also means the information, the latency, the speed of which the data arrives is going to be quicker than it is, say, in Sydney or Perth. So we have a lot of advantages with something like this.
Right. Amazing. And so just a little bit about your background. So you told me just off camera that you started life as a ranger.
Well, I started, actually, if I go back even further, I was once upon a time a ski instructor in Canada and did all the wonderful things that you do. Yeah. But more recently, I, in the 90s, I was a ranger in Victoria, in Parks Victoria, chief ranger visitor services at one stage, and ran tourism visitor programs down there. Right, okay. It was a great life.
And so how did you transition into the Sunshine Coast and what brought you here?
Well, my background was hospitality and tourism. And the reason I got into visitor services in Parks Victoria was because of that. It was the recognition that the parks needed to be opened up so that people could actually enjoy them, not locked away and hidden. And the more we could educate people about the environment and sustainability in the environment meant that people appreciated it. So I was actually brought into Parks Victoria as part of that process. So from there I then transitioned into Taronga Zoo and worked there for nearly a decade before coming up to the Sunshine Coast into tourism.
Right. And you started work with, well, I know that one of the things you did was with the RDA. Can you tell us a little about your involvement there and the first sort of start of the digital city, I guess?
Sure. Look, I started working for Regional Development Australia in 2010 and set up that, started that organisation along with a number of other people. And one of the things that we did as part of our regional roadmap for the region to try and explore the opportunities coming that we could see from the digital era was to set up a digital Sunshine Coast, which was a strategy for the region, which enabled the region to sort of have a glimpse of some of the opportunities that digital change was bringing. Some of the spin-offs from that included things such as on the coast, we had the Silicon Coast Group set up, which was a whole bunch of entrepreneurs and innovators on the Sunshine Coast that get together on a very regular occasion to actually exchange ideas, to talk, to socialise, just to see how we can grow the coast.
And you've obviously been involved in helping lobby to get this here, and you're actively involved in that. But the real role, apart from all these other activities, is the CEO of Suncare. So tell us about the Suncare, amazing story of Suncare.
So I was approached to get involved with Suncare about 3.5 years ago now, and the real reason for that is Suncare does in-home care, generally for our elderly, looking after the carers to ensure that they're looked after and ensure that our elders are really well catered for and have in-home care. So Suncare specialises in in-home care, so we don't do residential or any of that sort of care. We allow people to remain living where they choose to live. But the real reason I was selected was because there was a recognition that the sector needed to change. It needed to turn from an analogue business into a digital business. So what I've been doing over the last 3.5 years is taking what was effectively an old legacy style business and really turning it on its head and turning it into a digital business. So all of the staff that we now have on the road looking after people are using mobile phones, they're using laptops, we have an open desk style office. We've embraced co-working, if you like, and we have a very, very fluid and digital way of using everything. So everything is cloud-based, or everything is data center-based, really. We utilise the tools that we've talked about that are going to be available in this smart city, and that's what we see as our competitive advantage as we move forward into the 2020s.
And how many people do you employ on the Sunshine Coast?
So on the Sunshine Coast, we've got about 150 people, all up across all the regions we work in, from Rockhampton down to the Gold Coast. It's about 360.
It's a sizable operation. And are you in regional Queensland only, or are you starting to look elsewhere and maybe export markets?
Look, the opportunity is to always to look more broadly, but the areas that we're currently in still are growing so rapidly. The opportunities for us in this space are enormous. In saying that, we are looking, and particularly northern New South Wales is an opportunity for us, down through the Central Coast, or Byron Bay, down through the Hunter, down the Central Coast and Sydney. Great opportunity for us. However, we don't want to go too far away from our roots at this point in time, and we really want to ensure that we've mastered what we have before we then try to move too deeply into other regions.
Build a solid foundation.
Correct.
Get that right, and then look to how do we scale that, how do we grow that from there. And so in terms of lifestyle and living and operating and working and a business this size on the Sunshine Coast, are there challenges, advantages?
Look, there are absolutely challenges. One of the benefits of embracing digital technology is that I can work from home. I can work home being Mooloolaba, or I can work from anywhere. But the flip side to that is a lot of the meetings that you're expected to go to are in Canberra, because our funders generally come out of Canberra. Right. So you spend a bit of time down there. A lot of meetings are in Sydney. And for anybody that lives on the Sunshine Coast, they'll know I can actually fly to Sydney and be in a meeting at 9 o'clock in Sydney more easily than I can in Brisbane because of the Bruce Highway. So, there's issues there. Yeah. But what it means is I put a lot of kilometres on the car as well. Yeah. So you still have to do the old school. You still have to talk to people. Yeah. But we try to, wherever possible, embrace the digital communication tools as well.
I was talking to someone earlier today, and they said that they used to live in the southern suburbs of Melbourne, and sometimes when the traffic was that bad, they could actually fly from here into Melbourne, get into the city, into a meeting in the similar time that it would take them to commute.
I can totally feel for that one, honestly. I can drive from my house and drive to the Gold Coast, and if I bypass it using the new gateway, the part that is really difficult is the Bruce Highway. But if you do it after 9 o'clock in the morning, I can probably do that more quickly than getting into the centre of Brisbane, just because of the traffic lights and the city traffic at any time of day. It's astonishing.
Yeah, fantastic.
I could certainly fly to Sydney more easily.
yeah, I know. And now there's an international airport coming in as well.
That's right.
That's going to connect it with the rest of the world as
well.
So
that opportunity also means, because we have operations Rockhampton and looking up at Mackay as well, or Mackay as the locals call it.
Right.
I'm Scottish, so for me it's Mackay.
Right. I thought it was Mackay.
I was born in Glasgow, so for me it's Mackay, but the locals call it Mackay.
Do they?
It's
Okay.
It's an interesting one.
Yeah.
But we operate up there. So, but to catch a flight to go and work, say in Rocky, I have to go to Brisbane and then fly over the top of the Sunshine Coast to go there. Yeah. I'm hopeful that the new airport not only will give us those international, but those interconnects within the state as well.
Yeah. Fantastic. And so for people that want to either contact you, are you on LinkedIn? Are you
Absolutely. So Russell Mason on LinkedIn.
Yep. And Suncare?
Suncare, Suncare Community Services. Right. So you can just search us on Google or any of your other favourite social medias, Instagram and others. We do a lot of YouTubes and we put a lot of information out on Vimeo and YouTube. So if you're interested in looking at how we're actually making a difference and helping people, just have a good look.
Okay, and we'll put the links to the YouTube and some other resources down below this video, which will be hopefully getting out to you pretty soon. So Russell, it's been a pleasure, mate. Keep up the excellent work you're doing, and well done to you.
Thanks
and Suncare.
So much. Thanks so much, Lee. It's wonderful to meet you, and anybody who's interested coming up to the Sunshine Coast, great place to come and set up a business.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Thanks, mate.